Good morning, and welcome to our masterclass. I'd like you to just turn your cameras on so we can just have a look who's in the room. It's always nice to just see people. Hi, Lorna.
Hi,
Morning,
Almarie.
Etienne. Morning, Paulina. Hi, Ramketi. All right. Hi, Itumaleng. Morning. So for those of you that don't know me, not that I assume the entire world know who I am, my name is Almarie Goosen, and I am the implementation and program manager for the SMME clinic, which is part of Smart Procurement. Up until now, we've spent a lot of time supporting small businesses with masterclasses, but it became very evident to us that our colleagues in ESD, the ESD practitioners, really, there's some challenges that you also have. And a lot of that was highlighted in the recent report that came out by the BEE Commissioner on the effectiveness of ESD programs. So we did a little bit of research, phoned our friends, all who are in the industry, and we asked, what are the things that you really struggle with? And based on that, we came up with the content and the topics that you've seen on the, that we're going to do on a monthly basis now with you. But I do want to invite you to please reach out to us if there's anything else that you would like us to bring to you. The purpose of these masterclasses and how we engage with you is actually to start creating an environment where you can reach out to peers, where you get support, but also, if you get to a point where maybe you need to be put in touch with small businesses, that we can help you. This is really a community building exercise. So welcome. We are really delighted that you are here. The session is being recorded, so you'll get the recording afterwards. And in future, if for any reason you can't attend the session, if you have registered, you will still receive the recording. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, Lorna Ernst. Lorna is going to introduce herself and just give you a little bit of context around how her experience and why she's actually our first speaker. Thank you, Lorna. Welcome, and over to you.
Morning, everybody, and welcome here. I would just like to give you a brief background of my experience in the industry. I started consulting to mining companies in 2009 in the mining charter, social and labor plan, compliance space, which includes preferential procurement and a portion of ESD to the smaller to the communities surrounding the mines. And in that process, I ended up being appointed as the compliance and ESD practitioner at a large mining corporate that had 4 BEE entities that they needed to report on annually. And coming out of the mining space, my first audit on ESD was a nightmare, to tell you the least. And from there on, I decided I'm going to equip myself to do this better and get everything in place, because and not to go through anything like that, especially in an organization where we were training several companies in each, let's say 50 to plus companies in each one of the entities that we were being verified on annually. So that portfolio of evidence became a bit of a nightmare to manage. But once everything was set up and in place, it helped me. And also, I think the experience from the mining industry in stakeholder engagement consulting, in reporting on your return on investment, as well as risks and preempting risks early enough, that was very key in my experience in the time that I was doing the audits for these 4 entities. So with no further ado, I'm going to start presenting, and Almarie will advise me when there's hands up, and I try and make it a engagement. As the invite indicated, it's about also sharing your experiences or your concerns, or asking questions that I might not be addressing in this session or in the slides.
Yes, thank you, Lorna. If there's any questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and I will then stop and ask the question either on behalf of you or just ask you to open your mic.
So in looking at how to effectively manage your portfolio of evidence, it is asking yourself, why is POE and the way it is managed important? And I'm sure a lot of you and most of you have a lot of experience and knowledge about why this is important. But for me, to start off with, it was about achieving 100% of our BEE claim, because that first year of the audit, with me being fresh from in the BEE space, I lost a lot of points because I didn't know the nitty-gritty of all the documents that needed to be presented. And there is a lot of documents, there are a lot of information, and the documents each have a specific way that it needs to be. And also, as BE practitioners, we also realize that, and you also realize that for each sector, there are different rules. The generic sector, you've got your rules, you've got your points, you know what is going on. But in the other sectors, if you move from the one sector to the other sector, you have to almost realign again and understand what are the rules in those sectors. But also, if you are retrieving certificates or affidavits from various clients or various beneficiaries, you need to make sure that those affidavits and certificates align to the requirements of their specific sectors, or else you will also lose points. The other important point is, if you don't have your POE set up preemptively, and if you're not managing it on a monthly or quarterly basis, you are going to struggle to simplify your monthly and quarterly reporting. You're going to end up at the end of the year running around looking for documents, trying to fix documents that are not right, and it ends up being a bit of a train accident. It also helps you to improve time management. It is important that there's the necessary internal systems, procedures, requirements on service providers and beneficiaries. As you know, if you've got external service providers, or if you are an external service provider, if you do not have your documents right, you are going to cost your company that you are dealing with money, in terms of when they get, or not money, both money because they've spent money on your services, but also in terms of the points that they lose on their BEE submission. And that is also not a good place for you to be in as a service provider. So if you, as the ESD practitioner of the company being audited, places pressure on your service providers to preemptively provide you with the necessary documents and have KPIs and SLAs in place to ensure that they have it right and check on it as they send it to you, then it helps you to not run around at the end of the year. Also, those internal systems to ensure that the documents are in a safe space, captured online, so that it's not on your computer, and if you go somewhere and the computer is stolen, then you lose all of that work or have to request it again. And also your beneficiaries, they need to provide you with those documents, and you need to make sure that they understand the requirements if you're not using a third-party service provider. It also helps you to improve on your non-monetary spend to stretch your ESD budget. Why I say that is, if your POE is managed properly, and if you have a good understanding of what is required to stretch your ESD spend in terms of the non-monetary items that you can claim, then it helps you manage your budget better, because if your non-monetary items that you're claiming, let's say, for instance, your shorter payment terms or your internal mentoring systems are not working, and your management of your internal mentors, if they do not understand why they need to do certain things and how it aligns to them benefiting the company, in saving the company money, then they might not submit their portfolio of evidence in a timeliest manner or manage it in the correct manner. And from experience, I've seen the company that I worked for, as well as other companies, lose money because the internal mentors or the shortened payment terms weren't managed correctly. And then there is not a return on investment on the fact that you are saving money by implementing these non-monetary items. You also want to effectively manage opportunities to increase your ROI. We will stand still at this point a little further into the presentation, but again, if your portfolio of evidence is there to support your return on investment and the opportunities to create return on investment, then your reporting to your internal stakeholders and your investors also becomes easier, especially if you are doing GRI reporting, if your company is a listed company. Having a portfolio of evidence and structuring it and managing it on a monthly basis also helps you to identify and manage risks, both from the point of view of your preferential procurement spend file, but also in terms of looking at any beneficiaries that are complaining, or community members that are feeling neglected or left out of the beneficiary pool. So what are the critical POE items? And obviously I can't list everything and go through everything in detail today, but for the beneficiary, we need an ESD or ESD agreement, and there are critical items which need to be included in the wording. Items such as who the beneficiary is, what their company registration number is. If they're not registered yet, an ID number. It must mention what the objectives of the training is. There's a whole list of items that need to be covered in terms of the objectives and outcomes. And then also, and I'm just touching on a couple of the items in there. If there's a third-party service provider, listing the third-party service provider. And a lot of companies also in the ED or SD agreement build in items to protect them if the ED or SD company would try and sue them for certain items based on the ED or SD, on the ESD program. The BE affidavit or certificate. A lot of companies think that this is an easy item, but again, it's sector specific. There are differing thresholds for differing sectors, and it needs to be correctly completed. In my experience, until last year, I've been seeing templates dating from that were discontinued in November 2019. It has to refer to the 100 section 100 of the codes, and it needs, if it's an ICT company or if it's a construction company, it needs to state that the company is a construction company and an ICT company. And we'll also stand still a little bit later on how this can be a risk to your procurement, reporting, but also how your procurement reporting, especially from a supplier development agreement, can also place your ED or SD, or your SD claims at risk. Then there's the acknowledgement, and it must tie back to your proof of payment. If you've got 100 Rand set aside on your proof of payment, then there must be 100 Rand on the acknowledgement form. Obviously, remember that we're speaking excluding tax. You must specify if you want to include or exclude tax on your acknowledgement form. And the other thing to remember on the acknowledgement form is if you are doing mentoring, that proof of payment, that then aligns to the value of the mentor mentor's time per hour. Your CIPC and ID documents, not all verification agents always ask this, and I've been caught out running around looking for CIPC and ID documents if it wasn't on file for some of the beneficiaries. You all know to get your bonus points, we need the employees for the sampled guys that you mention, or the sampled beneficiaries that you mention, that they've shown an increase in turnover and or a movement from ED to SD. On the ED to SD, you then need an ED agreement and a SD agreement. Maybe they've moved from ED to SD only in the subsequent year, but then you've got the ED agreement from the previous year. But if they do that within 1 year, you need to submit both those and get both those agreements in the same year. Employees and increase in employees and turnover. Well, it's mostly employees, not necessarily turnover, but we have found that when you speak to the mining, to the DMRE, they want to see an increase in turnover in the reporting, and also you want to show to your investors and to your community members that there has been not just an increase in employees, but a real impact in access to markets for those beneficiaries. And that's becoming a very important reporting item in a lot of the portfolios of evidence, even if it's not currently necessarily in your BEE requirements. If you have done loan funding, then the loan amount paid, the date of the payment, and the outstanding amount in the period, they all need to relate back to what you are claiming on the acknowledgement form. And then in terms of the measured entity, they often look at the company BEE and company structure for the various entities. So have that ready. They also look at that in any event from the ownership structure earlier on in the earlier elements of the BE scorecard. But they could ask you for that as part of your BE submission. I've had that once or twice. Then internal mentorship agreements, registers of meetings, tracking of discussions, and those registers must be signed by both the mentor and the beneficiary. There must be tracking of discussions and meetings, and also you must indicate what the impact of those meetings are. There needs to be a portfolio of evidence showing that the meetings are having a positive effect in terms of either the technical or business acumen of the beneficiaries. The PO or contract with third-party service providers, including their management of the portfolio of evidence. There could be reports on the progress of the SMMEs, or the impact that they're having, or feedback from the SMMEs on what they are experiencing and gaining through the programs. The running costs from third parties, if it's not in the contract. So in two previous audits, the third-party agreements were requested where the third parties were running ESD centers in the communities, or in specific areas, so that they could measure whether the costs are extremely inflated or not. But also, this is a risky area because some of your third-party suppliers do not want to give you their breakdown of their costs because they feel that you can see how much profit they put onto it. But there are ways of managing it, and upfront, when you organize with or come into an SLA with your third parties, you can discuss how that running costs will be structured in their reporting to meet the requirements of the verification agents or the specific target, the specific charter government entities. Your proof of payments, including salaries, and then shortened payment term calculations. And there the date on the invoice versus the POP, the proof of payment date on the bank statement is very critical. This is often a difficult item to manage because you could have for a stakeholder 10,000 line items on your procurement spend, or they could be combined, but then each one of those invoices, you need to go check what was the date on the invoice, the actual invoice, and you actually I had to sit previously, the system captures the date that the beneficiary submits, or the supplier submits the invoice. But the date on the invoice is completely different. So sometimes when you do these, and this is when your portfolio of evidence on your non-monetary spend, you start asking, is this worth it? Especially if there's a lot of vendors on the shortened payment terms, but you end up going through thousands or hundreds of invoices and the pulling of the actual invoice to check what the date is on that invoice versus what's on the bank statement, because you can lose points as well as compliance verification points, because you can lose up to 10%, if not more, just based on the fact that your portfolio of evidence is not correct. Never mind the fact that the points that you lose because you are claiming certain items and they cannot be verified correctly. And then spend with ESD suppliers against your procurement file. This is a critical item because what's also my experience in the past is the entity started using a company, they're a small company, and they end up growing that company from ED to SD, not from ED, from a EME to a QSE, or from a QSE to a generic company within 1 year. And what the auditors do, they take your procurement file, they say, for company X, you have spent 50 million with them in this year, but they only have an EME affidavit. What is the problem here? Are you falsely reporting? What are you doing here? Then you need to go and request the actual financial statements from those beneficiaries to show that in the previous year, as per their EME scorecard, that they were within those thresholds and limits, and then also in terms of the time that you were with them, by when did you spend your spend push them into the next category. Okay. The important thing here with these linkages is that we are trying, or with these documents, is that we are trying to prove that the linkages between all the documents are real. You're being audited. The auditor is going to fine comb your documents, unless they're not a very good auditor. But my experience has been that auditors are very strict with how you present items to them and how they look at it. And they go in with the assumption that they are going to find something wrong, and they know where to look for the problems. So your beneficiary details need to match, your beneficiary details need to match with and your measured entity details and your service provider details need to match on all the items, whether it is the ED agreement or the SD agreement, the affidavit, the CIPC form, the agreement and the acknowledgement. And just in terms of the measured entity details, some companies have a combined corporate structure with different supporting or different entities in them that all report and get different BE scorecards. And the verification agents have previously identified that certain companies try to double claim on spend, and so if you are busy reporting for a company with different entities with different BEE scorecards, then the verification agent is going to look for where beneficiaries are shared or duplicated on your reports on your portfolio of evidence that you hand into them. Then maximizing your ESD budget and your return on investment is important, especially in terms of effectively managing your portfolio of evidence, but also in terms of how you as an ESD practitioner manages your day-to-day job effectively, not just from the point of view that you are looking at the here and the now. You need to develop strategies and speak to the procurement department, speak to the various areas of the business that you touch points with during an annual cycle to make sure that you are providing inputs that will help the investors view ESD less as a grudge purchase. No matter how much we say we want to do the best for our communities, and sometimes, and most business probably mean that sincerely, but your investors and your finance executives or the finance department often feel, especially if they haven't gotten an overview of the legislation and what the impacts and the requirements of the legislation is, and how a good BE certificate and scoring on your ESD and your preferential, well, BSD, including your preferential procurement items, help you to improve even getting in more business from more clients, especially if you are trying to achieve a level 1 to 4 score on your BE scorecard as a large conglomerate or a large corporate. Loan funding can be done in a manner that helps the investors see it as return on investment, because you do get back the money that you invest into your beneficiaries. Maybe not always. There are instances where ESD beneficiaries do not pay back the loan the way that they should, or eventually end up not paying it at all. And some companies have actually moved away from loan funding because it has had an extremely negative impact on the payback system. Then there's shortened payment terms. These are also a way where if we sell it to the finance department and to the investors in a manner that they can see the benefit of paying a beneficiary within 7 to 15 days of submitting their invoices, that you get points without having to actually spend money. There's also a lot of arguments against this, but there is also value in terms of this. I've seen companies, and seriously in the certain industries, they have 60-day payments terms with small SMMEs. These companies can't carry that, and eventually they end up going bankrupt because they are funding the business. They are funding a large business. Think about it. If you are paying a company that is doing catering for you and you are paying them 60 days to 90 days, because we all know that 60-day payment terms effectively could mean 90-day payment terms. If you are paying them 90 days after they have submitted their invoice and done the work and procured items, inflation hits them hard. How must they fund the next purchase order if you are not considering more beneficial payment terms for them? Internal mentoring, we did stand still at this for a moment previously, but what is important here for me to highlight is technical business leadership and executive mentoring can make a world of difference, not only to the beneficiary, but to your company. And that's where the return on investment is. I have seen companies doing technical mentoring with a business that they've just brought in and that they are testing. And that technical mentoring really helps that company, that SMME, align to the practices of that specific business and gives them core critical knowledge and skills which they may not have previously had. And this is not just something that is a return on investment for for the company, but it's an investment for the country as a whole. The same with leadership and executive skills. I've seen executives mentor companies from a QSE to a generic, and the difference that this has made in the lives of those companies and the way that they approach other executives of corporates to gain more access to opportunities. There is always the benefit of converting enterprises to supplier development spend, but there is also impact and risk management. And what I mean with this is, if you identify from your database enterprises that are beneficial and linked to the core business of your company, that you can develop through whether it's mentoring or various technical or whatever business programs to a supplier, and manage your impact and your risk through that approach, and not just say, I'm going to develop 10 companies, I don't care in what industry they are, I'm never going to use them again in any event, then there is no actual return, true real return on investment back into the company. Some of the programs that I've been involved in or even seen in industry speak about or look firstly at what are the little businesses in our community, or even QSE businesses within our surroundings, that have the capacity to, or have the potential capacity to, service my company at the end of the day, and then take them and develop them into a business that can grow from a EME to a QSE within 1 year or 2 years.
Lorna, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So, when we talk about converting ED to SD spend, especially on the return on investment, and we look at spending your ESD funding in an ecosystem, do you think that there's any benefit in, when you're looking for enterprises to develop, to go and have a look at the suppliers to the businesses that's in your SD program and developing them, so that there's a flow through of improvement in your suppliers' supply chain and the value that they get through to your company? Would that be something that would make an impact and maybe have a good story to tell?
That would have an impact, definitely, and it does have a good story to tell. It is a little bit more, I mean, you could also speak to the company that's doing your enterprise and supplier development, your third party service provider, to see how you can do that and then claim the points at the end of the day, or have a longer term approach to that. What we've also seen, because it's very difficult to manage it as the ED or SD practitioner that's maybe doing implementation for several companies all at once, but I think if there's a manner of monetizing and those impacts, and not just in terms of monetary value, but also in terms of the impact in the community, great. The DMRE has a very positive outlook on that, but you have to get your third-party ESD service provider to help you strategize and implement a program that can do that. So that is a nice program I would definitely recommend. But I also do think that just introducing the companies maybe on the same program to each other, and I'm not a person that like one size fit all programs, because I've seen financial executives, guys with CA degrees, having to go and sit in a financial training, because that is the requirement of both the third party service provider and the company that's not thinking about the financial impact to themselves, and that doesn't give you ROI in any event. But coming back to the one size fits all, there are often companies on the same level. Let's say if we are doing a training event with a lot of companies that have the same, they're all startups, and we're helping them enter into the next level, introducing them to each other, but also thinking of introducing them to the companies that sit next to them, the companies that's now graduated from startups to more advanced or intermediary. No, my English goes there. um, Intermediary sized suppliers, and yeah, I like that idea, Almarie. I don't know if that answers your question, but it does take a little bit of time and effort and engagement with your third party service providers to put that in place.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lorna. And I think, yeah, the message that I get from this is be very, kind of selective of the organizations that you use to implement your ESD for you. This one size fits all just doesn't fly anymore.
Yeah. Then aligning grant funding to meet operational improvement requirements with potential SD beneficiaries. This links to what I was saying about converting ED to SD spend, but it's also if this is your strategy, then you can have a win-win-win situation. And I'm not just grant funding, it can be loan funding as well. But if I've already got a company that is a supplier, and I know I've got a company that is a supplier, they need X, Y, and Z to improve their performance to my company. Why not give them grant funding and loan funding, and help them procure those items or those skills to help you improve your operational effectiveness? And if that is implemented in your ESD strategy, you can go a long way on getting return on investment. I've seen companies with large budgets on grant funding or loan funding procure or help companies procure yellow equipment so that they're not renting it and bringing a second-hand machine on site. They are bringing a brand new machine on site. I've seen companies go and help those companies through the grant funding or loan funding sponsor certain health and safety requirements for those companies to improve their health and safety at the operation. So I can speak about that one for a long time, but that is a key ESD strategy that companies should consider to get return on investment, and it makes an impression with the investors. Then reviewing the service offerings of ESD service providers, not just annually. You might have a 3-year contract with a service provider, but see if they are performing on the SLA. What is their pricing? What is their flexibility? What is their approach to the SMMEs? How are they doing their POE management? And what is their ability to measure the impact that they are making? And I think this links a little bit with what you were discussing now or asking about now, Almarie. I've just done a little bit of a diagram on how various items can create return on investment and value to your operation, to your company, and to your investors at the end of the day. If your ESD can create operational improvement, if it can improve non-monetary spend and expenses, and if it can help you in your risk management, whether it's stakeholder risk management, whether it's operational risk management, or whether it's funding risk management, those are all items that you can take to your internal stakeholders, but also to your external stakeholders, and say, we are making an impact. Okay, so risk and return on investment reporting to internal and external stakeholders. If you are effectively managing your portfolio of evidence, it creates a space for you to have an early warning detection system. You can see I've got a little bit of a gauge there to see if you are high or low in terms of your risks. And then it's also important to adapt your messages to the various audiences. So before you start creating your message, or even in your ESD strategy, you can say, what is my stakeholder engagement strategy, and what am I trying to achieve by conveying various messages? And then you create your reports according to those strategies that you have developed, and you can continuously adapt them to the requirements of the various stakeholders or the questions of the various stakeholders. So if you're reporting to investors and executive management, have a dashboard. Detail it, give it red and green and orange lights, but give them detail. Not a lot, because your executive and your management and your investors, they want consolidated, easy to read reporting. You might only mention then what is the red and the greens, and just brief detail on those red and those greens, and then say if you've got potential solutions for the red items and what are your action plans, or if you need anything to happen or action to be taken in terms of those red items, especially if it increases your risk in terms of compliance or community or stakeholder action. Have a more detailed report for senior and middle management, and note critical details and concerns on the reds and greens. When you're communicating with peers in other associated departments, please try and do this continuously. I have seen that having a good relationship with a person in the finance department that needs to give me my proof of payments at the end of the year, and having a system in place between the two of us helps us effectively manage our reporting at the end of the year. Having a good relationship, or having somebody understand in the procurement department why certain items are critical and important, and why compliance is critical and important, and having them help you create a strategy, and even incorporating your enterprise and supplier development into your procurement strategy. Those are key things that can make a huge difference in terms of the risk and the return on investment. Somebody in the procurement department can advise that these smaller companies need X, Y, and Z. They might not even be communicating that with you. So having your finger on the pulse is key, and it is extremely important. Also, I think there needs to be, and it comes back to your enterprise and supplier development strategy that you set out or need to change. What are the KPI and KPA messaging to the various people that have an impact? And sometimes people don't know what the risks are in terms of compliance, as well as stakeholder engagement and relationships with our community surrounding our businesses. And then if you then start creating awareness, and in your strategy, there is a requirement of a KPI that needs to be met, it helps also improve the life of the enterprise and supplier development practitioner. And then when we specifically report to external stakeholders, you again need to ask, who is the stakeholder? What is the purpose of the engagement? What is the purpose of the report? And it could be a legislative body, your government officials. It's again your reports and your compliance reports, but also any legislative body that might be requesting additional information from the ESD practitioner. Your ESD service providers. We've said a lot about this, but maybe there's some other examples that you can input. And then your ESD beneficiaries, your potential as well as your actual beneficiaries. What do you want to communicate to them? Are you making them aware of upcoming opportunities to participate in supplier and enterprise development programs? Or are you making them aware of procurement opportunities? Where are you advertising that this, and how are you managing their expectations? And that is something that often creates a bit of a vacuum. If you're not managing expectations and communicating with your beneficiaries or your potential beneficiaries, they can go to the legislative bodies and report your company, or even cause chaos through mass action. And then there's other stakeholders, and these could include internal stakeholders, interest groups, community forums, other businesses that you might need to report certain items to. I think, for instance, I think about, and you might think that this is not the enterprise and supplier development stakeholders or the enterprise and supply development practitioners work, but I have seen interest groups come to the enterprise and supplier development practitioner and make their lives difficult. And it might be a group that's completely an environmental group that is requiring rehabilitation, and why is it not happening, and who are your suppliers, and those communications, whether you then as the ESD practitioner speaks to your health, safety and environmental officer and make them aware. And that's why I'm saying it could include internal stakeholders, but also I've seen companies retrench employees and then link it to enterprise and supplier development to help them get alternate sources of income. And those communications are also critical to manage in a more effective and a very concise manner. Remember, these communications and reports also form part of your portfolio of evidence. So keep all documents, emails, registers, attendance registers. Make sure that you take an attendance register to stakeholder or internal or external stakeholder engagements, and minutes. If a legislative body comes to you and they advise you that there's issues, and you know that you've addressed these issues or try to at least to communicate with the stakeholders, and you don't have a portfolio of evidence in the form of attendance registers or minutes to support that, you could end up making your life more difficult instead of being able to make it easier. That takes me to the end of my presentation, and the floor is open for questions or concerns or comments. I'd really like to hear your inputs.
Thank you very much, Lorna. So yeah, what I'd like to invite you to maybe just share if there is something that if you have a question, or maybe if you just have a comment on some of the things that Lorna has said, or maybe want to share some experiences that you have. We would really appreciate some engagement here. You're welcome to raise your hand or just go off mute, or otherwise I'm going to start calling out your name. Can we hear from Bushle?
Hi guys.
Hi Bushle. Bushle, is there anything that Lorna talked about today that resonated with you?
Yes, a lot. I think mostly the challenges that come with the community, the forums and the community local business stakeholders, whereby if you don't do your things correctly, if you don't run your portfolio correctly, they will come and fight and they will create havoc, which in turn affects the whole running of the business. Just on Friday, if I may elaborate, I was in a meeting with the community, and they were forcing us to re-advertise so that they can apply, because they don't understand how they were not shortlisted in the quotations. So it can create havoc. It can create a lot of havoc because they closed down the mine, no entry, no exit. So yeah, that resonated with me a lot. And thank you for teaching us on how to avoid those kinds of problems.
Thank you, Buhle. Just so you know, the next session that we have is on the 23rd of June, and it will actually be about how to, how to engage with your stakeholders, how to get them all on board. And it's actually going to be done by Paul Hart-Nady, who's an expert in sales, because whether you sell to a customer or whether you sell to your stakeholders, it's the same skills. So hopefully, Buhle, you will also get a lot of value from that. But Lorna, do you have any, any maybe some of your experience as you dealt with these kind of things that you want to share?
I think in terms of your community stakeholders, like I mentioned there, it's about expectation management, and that is a very difficult thing, because if you read certain documents and certain charters, it creates a lot of expectation, but it doesn't necessarily set the tone and tells you what the targets are that these companies need to reach. And you need to mention the targets that you are working towards, and people need to understand that you cannot incorporate everybody, but then also having a strategy on percentages or weightings for local companies to be benefited, but also showing that you will not be, and this is a difficult thing, showing that you will not be bullied into accepting a supplier that is not the quality and will put your operation at risk. That is a critical thing to consider. You need to then have a portfolio of evidence showing that, and you as the ESD practitioner will have to get the technical guys or independent companies involved to do assessments on these companies to ensure that you have a portfolio of evidence that now shows that this company is not yet ready to do X, Y, or Z, or perform X, Y, and Z. Or if they enter into training, when they are ready to be to go from ED to SD. I don't know if that helps.
Very much. Thanks, Lorna. I'm just going to ask one more person to maybe engage. Yes, please go.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Basithile.
Hi, thank you for an inciting information that we have shared. And I would like to check if you guys planning to have a monthly session, because we experience a lot in our space. Because Lorna has touched base, especially if the company is decided to consider giving opportunities to retrench employees. We have applied that concept and we get a lot of fallbacks in the loan, also giving loans to our SMEs. We have tried that and we got a lot of fallbacks because they were not paying back the money. So I'm thinking having these sessions on monthly basis, maybe it will help us, because we will share ideas on what other colleagues has done to overcome such issues. Yeah, so thank you for an inciting information, Lorna, that we have shared.
Thank you. Almarie, if I can suggest, and I think we did discuss this, that we eventually maybe have a session which is a workshop, no presentation. There can be a presentation in the background, but where we share our insights and our stresses and give each other things or advice and tips that's helped us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Basithile, thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that you got value from this. Please tell your colleagues as well. We would love to grow this community. We are planning to have monthly sessions. The program, I'm going to ask the team to, at the end, to just show the video again of the upcoming, the slide of the upcoming sessions that we have. It's once a month. The idea then is also to have a quarterly, just kind of a round table where we have a discussion. And then, of course, at the Smart Procurement in Daba, we are planning to have a luncheon specifically for ESD practitioners, where we can come and share experiences, share best practice. like I said at the start, our intention is to create a community of support for ESD practitioners, but also for verification agents, you know, people who are in that industry, so that we can all come around the same table and talk about how, first of all, we can make our workload easier, but also to get small businesses to maybe understand some of the challenges that they, or some of the perceptions that they have around the fairness of allocating work, and just get them to understand, as Lorna say, you know, that there's a specific area or there's specific criteria that a business should adhere to. So Sandra, I see that you asked if there's a copy of the recording. Absolutely. So in future, if you cannot attend a session, if you have registered, you will receive a recording of these sessions.
Thank you.
So Lorna, I don't know if you just want, in closing, maybe want to just summarize some of the things that you said, and then we can close the call.
So in closing, I first of all want to thank everybody for their participation today, as well as the inputs that they've provided. I think that if you are managing your portfolio of evidence effectively, if you're managing your creativity and you're creating your creativity on your enterprise and supplier development strategy, if you don't have an enterprise and development strategy, involve somebody with the know-how of putting that enterprise and supplier strategy together for your company. And it does involve a review of your preferential procurement spend to ensure that your enterprise and supplier development strategy touches on all these critical elements to help you create a more effective manner in terms of your ESD reporting, as well as your end result at the end of the year.
Thank you very much, Lorna. And then, of course, I want to say that, you know, we are really here to support you. If you have any questions, if you need any support, if you're looking for a specialist, if you're looking for a specific small business that you need to do business with, if you have opportunities of ESD programs coming up, if you're looking for small businesses to sign up to those, if you are looking for small businesses to do business with, you know, in Smart Procurement, we have a really large network of small businesses that's actually very engaged. We've worked over the last 3 years to build a really engaged community of small businesses. So, you know, just send us an email. You can either reach out to Keshni Reddy at Smart Procurement, or you can reach out to me, or, you know, just respond to, as the emails come out to you, just respond to those emails, the links and all of that. But we are really here to support you. So welcome to the community, welcome to the family, and we really look forward to building a further relationship with you. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lorna. It's been incredibly insightful. I really hope that all of you can join us again in June on the 23rd. And with that, I'm closing. Have a blessed day. Have a great weekend. Look after yourself. Thank you.